cognitive development follow a maturation process? Or what role does experience and socialization play in cognitive development? Today we're going to focus on the cognitive development in children all the way into adulthood. And there are some different approaches to cognitive development, looking at specific stages and different cognitive tasks that it appears we master at different age ranges. So first, let's review an old vocab term, and that is a schema, because schemas are part of our cognitive development, building a foundation of categories of information where we can organize and understand our world as quickly and as efficiently as possible. During that process of learning new things in childhood, we might assimilate, where we add information to an existing schema, or accommodate, where we have to change or create a new category when new information is learned. And these schemas can be helpful at different stages of development. The psychologist who is most responsible for studying childhood cognitive development is the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget. And Piaget said that there are 4 stages of cognitive development and some key features of each stage. There's a great mnemonic device that we can use to help us remember the order of those 4 stages and at least one of the key features at each stage. That mnemonic device is: some pigs can't fly, others eat canned ham. The 4 stages of some pigs can fly are sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete, and formal. And a key characteristic of each stage, so for sensory motor, is the others in others eat canned ham, object permanence, followed by egocentrism in the pre-operational stage, conservatism in the concrete stage, and then hypothetical reasoning in the formal stage. Let's take a look at the sensory motor stage first. This is the first stage of cognitive development that lasts from around birth to around 2 years of age. This is where children are building their understanding of the world, really through their senses, because they don't have language yet to be able to use to explain what they are experiencing. So think about how babies put things in their mouth, build blocks and knock them over. They're building their understanding of the world through their senses and through movement. The pre-operational stage, from about 2 to 7, is where they now have language and even symbols to be able to understand the world, but they don't quite have some logical reasoning taking place yet. That comes in during the concrete stage. From about 7 to 11, they can think logically and concretely about information, and they can understand basic order of events. And finally, the formal operational stage that happens from about puberty or 11 and on is where we start to see not only logical thinking, but thinking abstractly or engaging in hypothetical thinking as well. So in the sensory motor stage, as we said before, one of the key features is object permanence. It's during this stage that children start to learn that things continue to exist even when hidden. So just because a toy is no longer in their sight, they now understand that that toy still seems to exist. Sometime about halfway through that stage is when children develop that. Early on, if you hide a toy, or if, say, a parent leaves the room, a child may be distressed because they don't understand the concept of object permanence yet. In the pre-operational stage, what we see develop is egocentrism, which is the inability to see things from other people's perspective. Think about how a small child might not understand how they hurt someone else's feelings, or why we teach them how it's important to share. Once a child is able to take on someone else's perspective, we say that they have developed what's known as theory of mind. And that is where they can understand that different people have different perspectives, thoughts, and feelings. It is essentially the opposite of egocentrism, and it takes place somewhere in the middle of that pre-operational stage. Also during the pre-operational stage, children develop mental symbols, and so this is their ability to represent objects and events mentally using words, images, and other symbols. As they start to develop language, they're able to do this more successfully. We also see children engage in what's known as pretend play in the pre-operational stage, where they can act out imaginary situations as they continue their cognitive development. And this seems really important for not only their cognitive development, but also their social development as well. Children in the pre-operational stage might also develop animism, where they give lifelike qualities to inanimate objects. Think how they might believe that their dolly has a boo-boo, or that their bear has feelings and doesn't want to be left behind. As they're starting to understand these concepts, they will add them to inanimate objects. In the concrete stage, the key feature is conservatism, which is understanding that just because something changes shape does not mean that it's changed in its original property. At the beginning of this stage, if you were to take 2 water glasses of the same size, for example, and pour one into a taller, skinnier glass, the child might believe that that glass has more water because the water is taller. As they develop through this stage, they will learn and develop that conservatism, understanding that just because it has changed shape does not mean that its properties have changed. Going along with that is reversibility. Once they have mastered that, they will also understand that you can pour the water back into the original glass and it will still have that exact same amount. In the formal operational stage, children develop that hypothetical thinking, where they're able to think about different possibilities, hypothetical what-if situations, and we also see the development of systematic thinking. So they can consider different possible outcomes for a single scenario before deciding which direction they would like to go. Abstract thinking is developed during this time as well, as they're able to think about ideas that are not tied to concrete objects or experiences, such as what is fairness or justice in society. Now, according to Piaget, these things happen for just about all children around the same age. But there was another psychologist by the last name of Vygotsky who added to this theory the idea of scaffolding and the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky's idea was that we don't just come to these answers on our own, but we need some supports and some help in order to get there. And that's where scaffolding comes into play. The zone of proximal development says that there are some things we can't do, but then there is this zone of development where we start to learn how to do things with help. Eventually, that leads us to be able to do things on our own. It's that middle piece with help that is so pivotal in our cognitive development. We don't learn things in a vacuum, but through socialization and through language development and having conversations, we develop our inner speech that allows us to metacognate and think and be able to find the answers to these questions on our own. As we get older, our cognitive development is going to change as well. There are 2 types of intelligence that seem to be affected by age. Crystallized intelligence, which is the accumulated knowledge and skills we have built over time, tend to increase as we get older. Think about facts, general knowledge, things that have not really changed that adults are able to remember exceptionally well. Whereas fluid intelligence, which is solving new problems or figuring out something that they have not encountered before, might become more difficult with age. Think about how new technology might become more difficult for an older person to be able to understand and utilize. Now, this type of intelligence changing is independent of any type of cognitive decline that is caused from changes in the brain, like Alzheimer's or dementia. Dementia is sort of a general term that we use to describe the cognitive decline that happens to some people as they age that impacts both memory skills and other thinking skills as well. And there is such a focus on cognitive development in the field of development as a whole because it's such a pivotal part of our lives. So is language development as well, because the question is, if we didn't have language, how would we think? So next up, we'll take a look at language development and how we learn to speak and the impact that roles in the way that we think. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember, be kind to your mind.